Yes, good morning, everyone, and welcome back to the Football Tribe UG channel. Robert Kesakos is your usual suspect. Welcome back to yet another live broadcast on your favorite football updates channel. It's a pleasure to be back here with you on this beautiful Thursday morning, the 5th of March, 2026. Yes, for those of you that are just joining us, welcome to the channel. I want to say thank you so much to all those that were part of last night's watch along as we followed up on the updates from the Premier League across the different stadia. Back here in Kampala, Uganda, it's a very cold, chilly morning following an early morning downpour. Actually, literally almost went throughout the night, in bits and stops. But it's a beautiful morning nonetheless. We are waiting for the sun to come out and probably brighten what feels like a very cold day in any case. But I hope you guys are doing well wherever it is that you are. Thank you so much to all those that have recently joined the community, the new subscribers. I say welcome to the Football Tribe UG channel. I hope you get to enjoy your stay with us and you get to love what we do every single morning and evening here, because we do come live every single morning, Monday to Saturday, as well as a night, Monday to Sunday. There for the night broadcasts, those ones are always on. They never take a break, including Sunday. Yes, including Sunday is one of the days that we do come to you live. So, yeah. Anyways, you will allow me have our audios tested and make sure everything checks out well before we get into the thick of the conversation for this morning, because like I said, there's plenty to talk for us to talk about. As you can see in the headline, we'll be talking about Arsenal's escape away at the Brighton at the Amex Stadium. We'll talk about Manchester City dropping points. We'll talk about Michael Carrick being condemned to his first defeat as a Manchester United interim manager. We'll talk about Chelsea's electric victory against a very poor Aston Villa side there. So it is plenty for us to talk about this early, Thursday morning. So for those of you that will be joining us on this journey, please do not forget to leave a like on the podcast and make sure you are already subscribed to the channel so that you do not miss out on any future publications. Of course, during the course of the day, we'll be putting out some content in the recorded episodes. But as you wait for that, do enjoy this one. It is continuing to rain out there. Like I've told you, it's a bit of a cold, chilly morning already in Kampala. So expect more of that. Anyways, I'm trying to have this, shared around. I hope a great deal of you can join us for this. For those of you that are just joining us, kindly like the broadcast, but also let me know where you're joining us from this beautiful morning so that we can engage. We'll be talking about the Premier League title race because it is boiling. It is boiling, and it has taken a bit of a twist following Man City dropping points, while Arsenal won on the other hand. But there are certain key factors that I do not want us to forget in the wake of that conversation, really. So please do let me know what your thoughts were on those respective results, as you already know them. For those of you that already know them, for those of you that do not know them, we are going to be reading them out. Okay, quickly. I think there was a very significant result on the night that may have sort of gone under the radar. In fact, even I that was doing the watch along, I had almost not taken a notice of what had happened on that, in that result. It was West Ham beating up against Fulham by 1-0. Now, I must be honest, although it's not a huge surprise, it's not one that I not seen that I had seen coming, given West Ham's recent poor run of results. But it has a significant implication on the Premier League table, as was because it puts West Ham United level on points with Nottingham Forest, with that 3 points that put them to 28 points. thanks to a goal by Somerville. So brilliant result there for Nuno Espirito Santo. So yesterday, Chelsea beat Aston Villa by 4 goals to 1. Arsenal had to grind it out in a very symbolic performance against Brighton and won their game by 1 goal to 0. And then Manchester City dropping points in a 2-2 draw against Nottingham Forest. And then Man United losing to a third man Newcastle, who beat them by 2 goals to 1. We'll get to discuss that as well. But also tonight, there is another fixture that wraps up match day 29 as Tottenham Hotspurs take on Crystal Palace. We know how poor Tottenham Hotspurs have been this season. But there's one place I want us to start, and that was at the Amex Stadium, where the table leaders, Arsenal, were in action against Brighton and Hove Albion. A very nervous start. I talked about the nerves kicking in this game. We've talked about the kind of pressure that Arsenal will play under for their remaining fixtures, because every game feels like a final for them. Every game is so important. We talked about player fatigue. We talked about those running legs looking tired, and we have called on Mikel Arteta to make necessary changes where he sees fit. And yesterday, unfortunately, Arsenal had to play that game without William Saliba because he was out of the matchday squad with a knock, and it was Christian Mosquera who had an underwhelming performance starting for William Saliba. Of course, he was later withdrawn for Ricardo Carafiori, as we could see, and then Piero Hincapié, who had a very brilliant performance, chipped in as the right centre back, and then Ricardo Carafiori moved to the left back. So it was a nervous start with David Raya gifting the ball away to Carlos Baleba because he attempted to find Declan Rice. I do not know why. Instead of finding Declan Rice, he did not go for, was it Martin Zubimendi that was on the upper side? I don't think, maybe not Zubimendi, but there was an option to David Raya in the build-up to that particular moment. And I'm thinking to myself, do you need to take that risk? Do you need to take that risk? Because it was a huge gamble. It was a huge risk there. Somebody says this is Pontape says 20% English, 80% something. Slow down. Somebody is asking me to perhaps reduce on my talking speed so that they can grasp what I'm saying. All right. Indulge me on this one. But it's my usual talking pace anyways. So it was a big mistake for David Raya to commit very early on in the game. I understand they're trying to play it out. They're trying to build the ball from the back as they usually do. But that was a big mistake, a huge call. And he escaped away with that one because it did not materialize into a key moment. Into a goal, because Carlos Baleba managed to float the ball or chip the ball over David Raya's head. Yes, it was Christian Mosquera that was close by, because I thought Christian Mosquera was in a better position to receive that ball as compared to Declan Rice. In the end, it's a blind pass in no man's land between where you had Carlos Baleba and then where you had Declan Rice. So he wins the ball back. David Raya is right on the edge of the 18 yards box. And guess what happens? Gabriel Magalhaes had rounded David Raya up, to go in behind him. And it was he that saved the day when he headed that ball out. But it was a big call, a huge save, a big miss for Carlos Baleba, a big blunder from David Raya, and Arsenal escaped with that moment. So it was a bit of a nervous start for the Arsenal. There's also a loose pass in there from Christian Mosquera very early on in the game. But they managed to hold their nerves and kept it together. And then in the 9th minute of the game, Bukayo Saka scored a brilliant goal to give Arsenal the lead. Arsenal win the ball back in the midfield area through Piero Hincapié, and then I think it was Rice that passes the ball to Yohan Tiba, who finds Bukayo Saka, does what he usually does, cutting back inside on his left foot, and he goes right from the corner edge of the 18-yard box. He goes from distance. Now, I thought it was a savable ball because it was right down the middle of the goal, but in visiting the action itself, the ball does take a deflection of Carlos Baleba, and somehow it eludes Bad Verbruggen before hitting on one of his legs and going in between those legs before hitting the back of the net. It was a bit uncharacteristic because you think he has right straight vision staring down that ball as it's being struck, but because of that slight deflection that he takes off Carlos Baleba is what makes the difference on a day that Arsenal did not turn up. Because between the 9th minute, it took more than 70 minutes for Arsenal to get their next shot on goal. That's how poor it was. In the opening half, both teams had only one shot on target, and you could see the frustration with Arsenal fans, whether it was online, whether it was those in the stadia, even though they tried to chant their team on, they know for a fact that it was a very, very wanting performance. Arsenal did not create. They struggled to have a strong hold on the ball. Perhaps the first half was slightly better, but the second half was a bit of a no-show. Until Kai Havertz comes on, until Leandro Trossard comes on, that he has an attempt, which basically wasn't essentially as well, because he's passed the ball and he tries to put his left foot to it, and it goes way wide of the mark, and you could hardly measure or figure out whether he was attempting to make a cross or he was attempting to strike the ball by himself on goal. But my good guess is that he was trying to, to wrap his left foot around that ball into the, far post. But he was unable to do that. So that's the chance. And then you have to look to Kai Havertz, who comes on equally for Victor Gyökeres, who had a very, very quiet performance, as many of Arsenal players, including Ebeleche Eze. So again, he gets the ball in his stride. That's Kai Havertz. But Carlos Baleba does well enough to recover on time to put in the block as Kai Havertz tries to strike that ball on goal. And then in the 88th minute around there, Kai Havertz had another chance where he fires the ball right direct to where Bart Verbruggen was at the near post. On the other side, David Raya had been forced into a couple of saves in there. There was around the 58th minute, there was an immaculate save from David Raya with Ruta's attempt, really. But other than that, Brighton themselves did not create much in that game. According to Fabian Hatzler, the Brighton and Hove manager, he says for him that only one team came out to play football yesterday, and that was his side. First of all, he complained about what he thought was time wasting. I saw him trying to ask the media interviewer, the Sky Sport journalist, whoever it was, behind the microphone, asking him, how many times do you see a goalkeeper going down 3 times? Now, an injury is an injury. David Raya, in saving that ball from Ruta, he appeared to have hurt his shoulder. And it wouldn't be the first time, because he's had his shoulder before and has had to play with painkillers. Now, when he hurts his shoulder, or appears to have hurt his shoulder, he goes down. And, of course, usually when goalkeepers go down, there's some time, eaten up there, because unlike outfield players, they cannot be forced off unless it's an entirely a whole substitution. So he says he went down 3 times. When you have when you play on with a bit of a niggle, it's going to kick in at any one point during the course of the game. So you're going to have to feed it and then maybe take a breather. So whichever way you slice it, for me, I would have loved to see Brighton and Hove Albion, with all their dominancy in that game, create more chances to try and hurt this Arsenal side. But as you'd have it, they only had 3 attempts on target compared to Arsenal's 2. They had 3 shots off target. Arsenal had 4. They had 5 blocked shots. Arsenal had only 1. They dominated possession to the tune of 60%. Arsenal only had % of the ball, and even that in itself was quite scrappy. But for a person that doesn't, believe in this XG, or does not appreciate it enough for what it is, I thought both sides could not even average a 1 goal XG. Arsenal had a 0.4%. 0.47%, whereas Brighton had a 0.82. Now, again, that's really poor. That's really poor, you know. It's really poor from both sides. So it was a very poor game. It was boring, unless you had a vested interest in it. And had Arsenal played that kind of game without them being at the summit of the Premier League table, perhaps we would not even be discussing the game. But with all that poor performance, with that underwhelming performance, with the lack of show up for a good number of Arsenal players, in my opinion, who included, but not limited to, first of all, Ebeleche Eze. Martin Zubimendi, you felt he struggled in that game, at least. But who did not? That's the question. For me, apart from Gabriel Magalhaes and David Raya, who himself committed a mistake, Gabriel Martinelli was a no-show in that game, really. Like I said, Victor Gyökeres, very underwhelming. It was a poor performance. I would go with Gabriel Magalhaes and Piero Hincapié as my standout performers of the day. If anything, if you want to qualify it for a standout performance on the day. So, a poor performance, but nonetheless, to Arsenal fans, to Arsenal well-wishers, it will not matter. Why it won't matter is that what matters the most is that they got all 3 points on a day. So, it was a bad day in office for them, but they still walked away with all 3 points. And that is what will count the most. Because at the tail end of the season, if they are to come out as champions, we will not remember this particular game. We will remember the games they will have won and that they will have come out with the Premier League title at the end. That they will be the ones wearing the silverware. That Premier League title will bear red ribbons of the Gunners. That's what will matter. Now, I know the title race is far from over, at least in my opinion, and Pep Guardiola acknowledges just as much that it's not yet over, given the context within which the two title contenders find themselves in. Despite Man City dropping points yesterday, they still have a game in hand, which puts them right back in the thick of the conversation for the Premier League title. I've said this before, and I'll not stop saying it again. If either team wants to win the Premier League title, they will have to be perfect or near perfect until the end of the season. It's 8 games left for Arsenal to play. It's 9 games left for Man City to play. So, a performance that those players will be quick to forget. Bukayo Saka acknowledged just as much. I think he was speaking to TNT Sport after the game. He said it was a poor performance. They know it. But what matters is that they got away with 3 points. Prior to this game, we had talked about Arsenal getting over or collecting points, at least 3 points, off of teams that cost them points last season in those so many draws that they had, as many as 14. And Brighton, who they could not beat up against last season home and away, as well as Everton, among those teams, as well as AFC Bournemouth, who beat them home and away. So this time around, they've completed a double against Brighton, who they also beat, I think it was in the EFL Cup by 2-0. So they've beaten them twice this season, but home and away in the Premier League by 2-1 at the Emirates Stadium, and then by 1-0 at the Amex Stadium. They've already beaten Everton. It was far from pretty because they needed a 1-0 victory for penalty from Victor Gyökeres to win that one as well. And their next fixture will be against Everton. Yes, they have to play Everton, they'll play AFC Bournemouth, and they'll play Man City, I think, in their next Premier League games. So, very, very important 3 points. What makes those points even more valuable is the fact that Man City had dropped points on the day. So let's get to the Man City game itself. Like I said, it was a whole host of games ongoing yesterday. So for me, it was this and that, a bit of that. You know, I was trying my best to keep in touch with all the games. Now, for the Man City game, I did not watch the first half entirely. But as I've gone back and revisited the highlights, I watched the second half, and it gives you sort of the picture that you need to sum up the entire game. Man City, once again, very good performance. They just could not get it over the line. We were having a preview discussion for the game between Man City and Nottingham Forest on a TikTok forum that I do frequent these days. And I was saying that for smaller teams, when they come up against the bigger teams, if they want to earn a point, if they want to win a game of football, they need key moments, they need standout performances from some of their few players. That somebody within that small team has to rise to the occasion and give a performance of a lifetime and give a performance unique to itself. And yesterday we saw that. At least I saw that from Elliot Anderson. I saw a cheeky goal from Morgan Gibbs-White. Beautiful, beautiful performance. Now, Man City took the lead through Anton Semenyo, who before scoring in the 31st minute had a couple of attempts already on goal. But it was him who once again scored to give Man City the lead. Remember, in their last league outing, he's the one that scored against Leeds as they won the game by 1-0. So, really, the significance of that result last weekend, or the continued scoring of Anton Semenyo, makes him a timely intervention for this Manchester City side, because ever since joining them from FC Bournemouth, I think he scored about 6 goals now in Man City colors. You know, it's really impressive. It's really impressive. They may not have won, but you will know. He extended his tally to 15 goals this season, only 3 behind Igor Thiago of Brentford, who has 18, and Brad Erling Haaland, of course, still leading the pile with 22 goals. But another brilliant performance from Anton Semenyo. I do not think Man City will have any complaints whatsoever or any regrets in paying the £61.5 million that they paid as guaranteed fees for the 25-year-old Ghanaian international. So, Man City took into halftime that 1-0 lead from Anton Semenyo. Now, I don't know, I kept saying this, and I couldn't have been more wrong. I had this almost given expectation that Man City were going to win this game. That it was a given that Man City would win this game. But I never forget to put the disclaimer that in football, anything can happen. In the Premier League, anything can happen. You can't get the least expected result on any given day. And perhaps yesterday was one of those days, you know. While Matt Sales was putting in a save on the other side, Gianluigi Donnarumma was also being tested by Morgan Gibbs-White at one point, you know, as well as I think Igor Jesus. So, whereas Man City were dominant in all the things they did in creating the chances, it was without giving away chances on the other side for Nottingham Forest, because as the statistics show, Man City had 7 shots on target and Nottingham Forest had 4. They had 8 shots off target. That's for Man City. Nottingham Forest had 2. Man City had 6 blocked shots. Nottingham Forest had 3. Of course, like I said, Man City dominated the other key aspects of the game as well, because it was Man City dominating possession to the tune of 70% compared to 30%. You did not expect Nottingham Forest to go to the Etihad Stadium and dominate the ball. No, they have wanted. But somehow, they fought and stayed in the game. Morgan Gibbs-White with a back heel equalizer in the second half, with a back heel equalizer. That's as cheeky as a goal you're going to see in the Premier League. That was in the 56th minute. Once I watched that goal, it reminded me of Thierry Henry's goal versus Charlton Athletic on the 2nd of October, 2004. Yes, go back and watch that goal. Antonio, may his soul rest in peace. Jose Antonio Reyes provided the assist. And in almost similar fashion, receiving the ball with the back to his goal, with a defender in behind him, and the goalkeeper in his goal, he takes the back heel, and that ball goes in between the legs. And the goalkeeper, and the ball goes through in between the legs of the defender and that of the goalkeeper before hitting the back of the net. So a beautiful, beautiful cheeky goal from Morgan Gibbs-White to restore parity. Now, as soon as they restored parity for Nottingham Forest, I just had it in sensed that Man City were always going to score because they looked the more likely to score. And it was no surprise that Ryan Atnori floated in, I think, a beautiful corner kick for Lodri to head home to give Man City the lead to make it 2-1. And for the first time in quite a bit of a while, Man City scored from a set piece, or at least from a corner kick. Now, Man City is one of the Premier League teams that have scored the fewest number of goals from set pieces. I think from free kicks, corner kicks, and throw-ins, they've scored as few as 6 goals so far this season. That's quite a small number, and you'll find that they are 18th on that table. From penalties, they've scored 3. They've scored 3. So it's Man City, Burnley, Nottingham Forest, and Wolves that have scored the fewest number of goals from set pieces. When we say set pieces, we mean free kicks, corner kicks, throw-ins, as well as penalties. So a penalty is equally set piece play. So out of those 9 goals, only 3 have been penalties for Manchester City, and the other have come through the other means. So that also, what does that mean? It also shows the continued, not reliancy, but the continued significancy of set piece goals in the Premier League this season. It will show that, because, for example, in the Man United game, we had a penalty in that game, scored by Anthony Gordon. So it really, really shows the significancy of set pieces in as far as this season was concerned. Fabian Hatzler was complaining about set pieces in the build-up to their game against Arsenal. And then Pep Guardiola, on the other side, when he was being pressed about the same matter, he simply said, quit complaining and adapt. All you have to do is adapt. It is the new reality. Whether you love it, whether you hate it, it is what it is. Meanwhile, Fabian Hatzler is hell-bent on demanding for rules. Well, the rules are not going to be made this season. He will have to wait until the end of the season for the Premier League to sit down and say, okay, there's a lot of complaints about how much time maybe teams spend on taking a set piece, whether it's a free kick or a corner kick or even a throw-in. Perhaps there's a lot of things that teams are going away with or getting away with when it comes to set piece play, whether it's pushing, shoving, and during that moment of crowding the area of the box, trying to block the goalkeeper and all those shenanigans in there about. They'll have to sit and discuss that. Whether they come up with new rules to try and protect the goalkeeper or defenders, or whichever way you may have to look at it, and strikers in a similar strength, we'll have to wait and see, but that will have to wait until next season. But also, for me, I feel it's just a phase in the game. It's just a trend in the game. It's one that you ought not lose your head about. Why? Because sooner or later, it will no longer be the thing. Because how many years have we lived with teams playing tic-tac football? They played it for a good chunk of time. Not that Pep Guardiola invented it, but he popularized it with his Barcelona, took it to Bayern Munich, brought it to Man City. And a lot of teams played that kind of football. Build from the back, etc., etc., be dominant on the ball. And now the game seems to have shifted. The same way you had a 4-4-2 formation be the go-to formation back in the days for most managers. And it was Arsene Wenger who said a 4-4-2 is the most balanced system of play in as far as football is concerned. But fast forward, present day, you'll find most of the most popular systems are 4-3-3. You'll find a 3-4-2-1. There you'll find a 5-3-2. A 5-3-1-1 kind of system, or depending on how they may tweak it, you'll find the 4-1-4-1 kind of system. So semantics at the end of the day, but For now, it's set pieces that are dominating the conversation, but it's only the Premier League, because when you go elsewhere, that's not the style of play. When you go to Spain, it's still tic-tac football. When you go to Italian football, it's not set pieces that are making the headlines. That's why I feel it's quite an important tool or significant tool for these Premier League teams to use when they go over to Europe, because the Premier League still has, I think, 9 teams involved in European competitions. Crystal Palace in the in the UEFA Conference League, Aston Villa and Nottingham Forest in the UEFA Europa League, and then we know about the 6 teams in the UEFA Champions League. That's Arsenal, Liverpool, Tottenham Hotspur, Man City, Chelsea, and Newcastle. So it should be a tool that they look to use. And then, okay, so getting back to the Man City game, like I said, Man City were fighting their way back in. Now, this is what I've always said, and I keep saying it. For as long as you have a slim lead in any game of football, you're bound to be skinned. You put yourself at risk. You put yourself at risk. The risk of either conceding an equalizer, the risk of dropping points, whatever situation or moment of the game you're in. And for Man City, for as long as they could not increase that gap every time they led the game, they're always at risk, because when Rodri scores in the 62nd minute, Nottingham Forest came back with the response of their own through Elliot Anderson. What a goal. If you've seen balls being curled to the far post, then go watch that Elliot Anderson strike, because the way he puts that curl to it, to bend it beyond McGahey and just enough on target, but also further away from Gianluigi Donnarumma's reach, and it hits the back of the net, is one that was really, really impressive to watch. So he scores in the 76th minute to restore parity, and it's 2-2. And we're thinking, oh my God, it's game on. Arsenal fans in the stadia at the Amex were celebrating. Now, when they celebrated that equalizer, Bukayo Saka acknowledges that they had them celebrating, and he knew, because there was nothing to celebrate in their own game, he knew that something had happened elsewhere. Now, they very well know that they are in the Premier League title race with Man City and nobody else. All the others are fighting their own respective battles. Man United, Chelsea, Liverpool fighting for those UEFA Champions League places, Aston Villa in that mix. Then you have these other teams that want to finish within the Europa League places, and etc. And then you have the teams battling against relegation. So, the goal in itself, Elliot Anderson, was beautiful to watch, but Callum Hudson-Odoi providing the assist. But what a performance from Elliot Anderson. Really, really, really good. That game further re-emphasized why teams like Manchester United and Man City want to sign him. I've seen a lot of Arsenal fans more wishful than being concrete linkage between the English midfielder and the Gunners saying their team should sign Elliot Anderson. Now, I do not know whether all Arsenal fans share the same sentiment, but at least the allusion to that is sign Elliot Anderson and then you can let go of Christian Norgard. No offense to Christian Norgard. But anyways, I think for any fan out there, they will always wish to have that good player that they do admire from another team. So perhaps it's simply that. Now, Man City had so many other chances of trying to put the game to bed, but it just could not happen for them. There's a strike from Rodri, went off, hit off the mark. There's a chance from Savinho with the last kick of the game. Murillo with the save of the game. Now, the goalkeeper, Martials, has come out of his goal. He does not get anywhere near the ball. The ball is being fumbled in the area in between there. Savinho gets the last kick of it, and Murillo had run in behind Martials, and he cleared that ball with literally the last kick of the game. That was a beautiful rescue. If Nottingham Forest end up surviving the drop this season, they will look back to that moment as one of the key moments that saved them a point at the Etihad Stadium. But also, because it was so good, I saw Arsenal fans celebrating it just as much online. Somebody said, if they do win the Premier League title, Murillo should be invited to their trophy parade because he was the difference. Otherwise, that ball was destined for the back of an empty net. Now, there were some penalty shoutouts in that game. There was a penalty shoutout for Brad Erling Haaland for when he was brought down in the area by Matsels. Now, Brad Erling Haaland sort of nicks the ball wide and it's going out, and Matsels comes in to try and he had obviously come in to put in the block, but eventually gets nowhere near the ball. He makes contact with Brad Erling Haaland, but I would say in a more reserved manner. You know how you come out and then realize, oh, I'm not going to get there early enough, and you sort of bend off of it. That's what he attempted to do, but nonetheless, he still made contact with Brad Erling Haaland. Now, I do not know if VAR reviewed that incident and cleared it, or it was not deemed to be a clear and obvious error by the referee. So, if the referee had given it, the penalty would have stood. I do not think VAR would have stepped in to overturn it, but he did not give it. He did not give it. Man City fans will mourn about that one. And perhaps rightly so. It was a 50-50. If you give it, no qualms. If you don't give it, perhaps there's justification for it. I could not find sufficient justification to convince myself that it's not a penalty. That's the thing. And that's why I say, if it had been given, I do not think it would have been overturned. Then, the other penalty shout out for Man City was the contact made between Rodri and Elliot Anderson. Again, this is very late on in the game. Now, Rodri gets a clean strike of the ball, and Elliot Anderson was coming through. Rodri ends up kicking him. And for me, that one is not a penalty. Man City fans have claimed, or some football fans have claimed, it should have been a penalty. But in my humble opinion, or school of thought, is that it's not a penalty. And why? Because Rodri gets a clean strike of the ball, it does not hit the target, and it is his fall through that kicks into Elliot Anderson's leg. If you notice, he kicks Elliot Anderson in behind his leg. So, if Rodri had kicked the ball and then Elliot Anderson's attempt to put in a block, he has his foot landing on the top, anywhere on the top of Rodri's foot or leg, then would have made the argument that maybe it's a penalty or that it should be given. But for me, it's not a penalty. I think Nottingham Forest had a penalty shout of their own. I don't remember particularly who the player was involved, but again, for me, it wasn't a penalty. It would have been an unjust one to be given. So that's the game. Man City dropping 2 points, and yet their title rivals on the other side had won. I've seen some Man City fans say the title race is over. No, it's not over. It's not. Why? Man City have a game to play, a game in hand. And if they do win that game in hand, for me, I still contend the mathematics is still simple. If Arsenal want to win it, they just simply need to win all their remaining games. Because the margin for error is very small, if any. Man City, if I am Man City, I'm thinking, I have a game in hand. If I win that, I reduce the 7-point margin to merely 4 points. I still have to play Arsenal at the Etihad Stadium. And if I win that game, I reduce the 4 points to 1 point. Now, I then have to take a bet on myself that somewhere along the way, another team will force Arsenal to drop points. It could be a draw, and then Man City win, and then suddenly they move to the summit of the Premier League table. I'm not saying that's how it's going to play out. I'm simply saying there is a possibility it plays out that way. Because mathematically, they are still in it. And beyond the mathematics of it, it's still, in part, within their control. When I say in part, it's about 30% part. Because if Man City are to be perfect in their remaining 9 games, they still have to pray that somewhere along the way, Arsenal draw points in a game other than between Man City versus Arsenal. They have to pray for that to happen, you know. So Arsenal's next game is against Everton. Sorry, yes, it's against Everton. Man City's next game is against West Ham United. So I was looking at some of Arsenal's next fixtures, and they're really difficult fixtures. And it's not to say that Man City then have it easier. No, they practically don't. Because in some of Man City's remaining games, they still have to play Chelsea, they still have to play Arsenal. And the bit about playing Arsenal is that they have to play Arsenal twice in a space of less than a month. March 22nd, EFL Cup semi-finals at Wembley, and then April 18th in the Premier League. And who knows if they will have a chance of meeting in the FA Cup, because both teams are still in the FA Cup. So when you look at Man City's next 5 games, they have West Ham, they have Chelsea, they have Arsenal, they have Burnley, they have Everton. Now, of those 5 fixtures, 2 are the most difficult or challenging when it comes to Chelsea and Arsenal, because Man City has not beaten either of those sides this season. Both games ended in 1-goal draws. In comparison, when you look on the side of Arsenal, the other side, their next game is against Everton. They have a game against Bournemouth, and then they will play Man City. After Man City, I don't remember who they have to play. But in their remaining 8 games, they have 3 London derbies against Crystal Palace, West Ham, and Fulham. So those are really, really difficult games. Beyond those London derbies, they also have a Newcastle in there. So imagine you have to play Everton, you have to play Newcastle. We saw what Newcastle did to Man United yesterday. So it's not going to be an easy run into the Premier League title. So Man City still have a chance, and a big one. They're not outright favorites, because Arsenal are the outright favorites, but they still have a chance. And that chance, 70% depends on them. 30% depends on what Arsenal do, or what Arsenal's opponents do in the running to the title. It could go down to the wire. Just imagine the situation plays out the way I have explained it, that Man City win their game in hand and also beat Arsenal at the Etihad Stadium. That in itself, if all the other factors are kept constant or in perfect mode, that means by the time we get to the tail end, we could get to the final day of the season when Arsenal need to win the Premier League title, because Man City will be only 1 point behind them. How many times have we seen that? We've seen it twice, Man City, Liverpool in the running for a Premier League title. We saw it with Arsenal, Man City 2023-2024 season. So an element of luck is bound to come in. And Arsenal, speaking of luck, yesterday had luck on their side, because while they did not play a good game, there's a penalty shout out for Gabriel Martinelli's foul. I do not remember against who, sometime during the first half. VAR reviewed the incident and apparently cleared it, but I would have loved to have a closer look to make my formal judgment on that one. All the footage that I've seen in terms of reviews has not reshown that incident. I need to look for it and see it again for me to formulate my opinion around it. But as I wait to review that one, allow me move on to the other results from the Premier League last night. Yesterday, again, like I said, an electric Chelsea beating up against Aston Villa, a poor Aston Villa, by the way, by 4 goals to 1, a hat-trick from Joao Pedro. What a performance he's having. 14 goals to his name this season in the Premier League in Chelsea colours is really, really brilliant for the former Brighton striker. there. I think the Brazil national team, Carlo Ancelotti, will have a bit of a selection headache because I do not think there's a Brazilian forward that has scored more goals than Joao Pedro this season, in as far as those that play within Europe are concerned. I may not be up to speed with all Brazilian forwards playing across Europe, but I'm sure. First of all, Rodrigo Goes is out of it through injury, suffered his ACL, meaning that since 2023, Real Madrid players have suffered about, is it 17 ACL injuries? Anyways, so you have Richarlison, far from good. Gabriel Martinelli, he's only been good in cup competitions. That's the Champions League, EFL Cup, and the FA Cup. In the Premier League, he's been really, really poor. And yesterday was an exhibition of that. Then you look around, Vinicius Jr. is a winger, so he's not going to be played as a striker. And it leaves Joao Pedro to be your starting target man. We'll have to wait and see what Carlo Ancelotti does during the March international break, during those games. So, anyways, Aston Villa opened the scoring through Douglas Luiz, with Leon Bailey providing the assist in as early as the second minute. And they held on to that lead for at least more than 30 minutes because it was in the 35th minute when Joao Pedro scores to restore parity with a simple tap-in from a Malo Gusto layup. And then in the 41st minute, Oli Watkins had scored, but that goal was ruled out by VAR, I think for offside in the build-up. And then Joao Pedro in the 6th minute of stoppage time of the first half, with Enzo Fernandez providing the assist, had a chip over Emiliano Martinez to make it 2-1 for Chelsea. Beautiful, beautiful goal. And then Joao Pedro, goal scorer, turn provider in the second half, in the 55th minute, to help Cole Palmer get his name on the score sheet. I mean, Aston Villa, I think it was an attempt. I don't remember the Chelsea player that makes the attempt. It's deserved. And the ball falls back to Joao Pedro, makes the pass for Cole Palmer, and he slices that ball through a forest of legs, and it hits the back of the net. Now, Emiliano Martinez had some brilliant saves yesterday, but he had a poor day in office, might I add, you know. There's a save he pulled of Alejandro Garnacho. It was a foot save. I don't remember who the other Chelsea player was, but he had some really, really important saves. And then, of course, in the 64th minute, Joao Pedro with Alejandro Garnacho once again providing the assist. A good simple layup and an easy tap in into an empty net. Now, as I watched those Joao Pedro goals go in, you know, there's been conversation ongoing within Arsenal forums and circles amongst their fans. I've seen this online, particularly on X. Every time a striker that Arsenal did not sign scores, they tend to paint a picture. Oh, instead of signing Victor Gyökeres, we should have signed a Benjamin Sesko. We should have signed a Joao Pedro. And for me, watching all those three goals that Joao Pedro scores, my question to the Arsenal fans was, how many chances of that type have Arsenal created for Victor Gyökeres? That's the question you ought to ask yourselves before you complain about his lack of goals or his insufficient goals. Ask yourself that question, you know, and then we'll have the deeper conversation about his flaws. So a very brilliant performance from Chelsea. Richard James, good performance. Garnacho, brilliant performance. I spoke about Garnacho in the build-up to that game, that he also not to make it about himself, but more about the team, and I thought he did right by himself. Cole Palmer, bit of a muted performance, but you'll take the result. Malo Gusto, I thought he did well. So Chelsea, with those three very, very important points going into match day 30 of the Premier League for them, because that result put them on 48 points above Liverpool, who have slipped to 6th place. Remember, Liverpool the day earlier had lost to Wolverhampton Wanderers by 2-1. That means Man United in 3rd place at 51 points. That's 9 behind Man City. Aston Villa in 4th place with 51 points. Aston Villa have lost 2 consecutive games. Over the weekend, they got beat. They got beat by Jesus Christ. I'm trying to remember. Aston Villa were getting beat over the weekend. Who was beating them? Somebody remind me quickly before I forget. Match day 28, Aston Villa lost. Yes, they lost to Wolverhampton Wanderers by 2-0. So they've lost 2 consecutive games. They've been poor throughout ever since the turn of the year. They've been very inconsistent. They've not won 2 consecutive games in as far as the Premier League is concerned. So, but that's the significance of that Chelsea victory. That's the significance of that Chelsea victory. So it will, and for me, if they can be consistent with that kind of performance, with those sorts of performances between now and the end of the season, then top 4 surely will be up for grabs for them, or they will secure that. Anyways, moving on from that result as well, the other result, very significant result, was at the St. James's Park, where Man United lost to a 10-man Newcastle by 2-1. For the second consecutive time, in a space of just a matter of days, Man United were playing against 10 men, because over the weekend, as they beat up against Crystal Palace by 2-1, Maxence Lequois was given a red card in that game. So they were reduced to 10 men, and when they were reduced to 10 men, they were also awarded a very dubious penalty, which they scored, and yeah, they won that game eventually, with Benjamin Sesko scoring the winning goal. And then you had, so yesterday, it was Jacob Ramsey that was sent off for a second yellow card. Of course, he got himself sent off. Then Newcastle won a penalty through Anthony Gordon, with Bruno Fernandes committing the foul. And then Anthony Gordon stepped up, scored the resultant penalty. And then Bruno Fernandes provided his 14th assist of the season for Casemiro as he headed into the back of the net past Aaron Ramsdale, was in the Newcastle goal to make it 1-1. And then the game played out the way it played out, with very, very significant saves from Aaron Ramsey, making saves against Kobe Mainu in that game. He made a brilliant save against a Lenny Yoro header with Bruno Fernandes floating in that ball. And then he made another brilliant, very, very brilliant save with his weaker hand from a Joshua Zirkzee, attempt. So, and then there's another header from, who was it from? It kissed the base of the crossbar. Sorry, not the base, but the top part of the crossbar, to show you how close it was. And then Newcastle did just enough to stay in that game. And by staying in that game, they gave themselves a chance. Remember, they were down to 10 men. Dan Burn with some brilliant interventions. Kieran Trippier doing just as much. They win the ball back. They play in Willian Osula, who had come on with Jacob Murphy in some 2 late changes by Ed Howe, attacking changes. And he chases that ball down. You almost guess it, thinking maybe it's not going to latch onto it. It nearly goes out, but he manages to keep it in. Runs, cuts in on the inside, and then he scores a brilliant, brilliant goal. As brilliant a goal as you're going to see on any given day. William Osula, brilliant, brilliant strike there. He scores to make it 2-1. And wow, St. James's Park was sent into wild celebrations. St. James's Park was sent into wild celebrations. Now, that result meant that Michael Carrick had suffered his first defeat of the season in his time as interim Manchester United manager. It was his 8th game of managing Man United, 1-6, drawn 1 against West Ham, and now losing to Newcastle. Newcastle, for, first of all, Ed Howe was demanding for a response from his players after their horrendous performance against Everton, in which they lost by 3-2, something that caused him to drop Nick Pope to the bench and give Aaron Ramsdale this game. And, well, did he pay that trust with those brilliant saves? And they rose to the occasion with a standout performance. Beautiful, beautiful performance. Now, of course, Man United had won the first leg by 0-0, but that notwithstanding, I thought, now, I do not think you can blame Man United. I don't think, maybe you can blame them for losing to a 10-man team, because this is the second time it's happened to them this season. Remember, in their defeat against Everton by 0-0, yes, the first leg, they lost that game by 0-0. I think, was it Ilman Ndiaye who scored in that game against the 10, or either Ilman Ndiaye or Kenan Dewsbury Hall, but most likely the former. So, anyways, they lost that game when Everton were down to 10 men. Yesterday, they did it again. But the heroics of Aaron Ramsdale are what won Newcastle that game. But Man United should have done better defending. I think it was it Eden Heaven in that frame with, not Harry Maguire. When you look back to that goal, I think it was Eden Heaven who I thought should have done better before that goal goes in. You know? And then where was the Manchester United midfield? Manuel Ugarte. You know? Manuel Ugarte and his midfield partners, where were they? So, you know? So I think it was Eden Heaven and Harry Maguire, because William Osula uses Harry Maguire as his blocker, as his shadow, to skew the vision of Seny Lomans before bending that ball into the back of the net. And I mean, how lovely a strike that was. How lovely a strike that was. Sorry, it wasn't Eden Heaven. It was Tyler Marasia, yes, who had come on for Nusa Mazoroi. He's the one that was used. Tyler Marasia. He should have done enough. He should have closed down quickly William Osula, but perhaps he decided to take a bet on themselves that that they would block him out. So beautiful results there, very significant result for Ed Howe's side, because it whereas it does not elevate them much, it takes them to 39 points above Brighton and Hove Albion. Newcastle are not going to have it any easier. They have a game over the weekend. They play against Man City in the FA Cup. I think them getting knocked out of the FA Cup, I suspect they will get knocked out, could help them perhaps have their focus on finishing well in the Premier League and in the UEFA Champions League. In the Premier League, their next game will be they will be playing away to Chelsea. After playing away to Chelsea, they'll play at home in the Trainware Derby against Sunderland. They lost that fixture by 0-0 in the first leg, so they need to plot the perfect revenge for that one. Then after that, they'll have a game against Crystal Palace, a game against FC Bournemouth, and a game against Arsenal. Now, I do suspect, and this is my prediction, that by the time they get to play Arsenal, they will have dropped out of the FA Cup, they will have dropped out of the UEFA Champions League. It's a mere prediction. Because I do not think they'll get over Barcelona. I think Barcelona will knock them out over 2 legs. I think they could get done by Man City over the weekend in the FA Cup. And that means they will have the Premier League left to play for. And that is within this 1 month of March. So, and then that's why I keep saying some of those Arsenal games are going to be very difficult. Because if you play Newcastle and the only competition they are still fighting for or left in to play in is the Premier League and looking to have a good end to the season, then you are up against a very, very difficult opponent. And it matters less Arsenal being at home, but we know at least some of these teams playing in Europe, playing in these other cup competitions poses a challenge in terms of further stretching their squads and things like that. So they'll have that to think about, really. And then Chelsea, they needed that result, but they are up against some really, really difficult games coming up. They have Newcastle, of course. They have Everton. They play Man City. They play Man United and Brighton. That next run of 5 games is going to be very critical to the chances of them finishing in the top 4. Either by the end of the next run of 5 games, they'll be in a good grasp, control of their destiny, of the top 4 finish, or they'll be far from it. Either of those 2 things will happen. Because these are really, really difficult games for Chelsea. Now, the advantage for them is 3 of them are at home. Against Newcastle, against Man United, and against Man City. And only Everton and Brighton are away from home. It gives you a bit of an advantage. But let's be honest, how many teams have made a fortress of their home grounds? When you go and look at the home table, in terms of teams that have amassed the most number of points at home, Man City lead that table with 36 points after 15 games played at home. They've only lost 1 game at home. They've drawn 3 and won 11. Arsenal come in, but they have played a game less at home because they've played 14 compared to Man City's 14. Sorry, compared to Man City's 15. So they come in at 35 points. 11 games won, 2 drawn, only 1 lost. Let me be reminded, why was that loss? Because this season they've lost to Liverpool. It was against Man United. Yes, they lost to Man United. So because they've lost 3 games this season against Aston Villa, Man United, and Liverpool. So Chelsea are 12th on the Premier League table with 14 games played for most points amassed from home. So whereas it can be an advantage having those games at home, their home form has been far from convincing. It's not the worst, but sometimes good is not good enough because you have teams like Fulham, Sunderland, Newcastle having a better home record than Chelsea. Teams like Brentford, teams like Bournemouth, teams like Brighton, teams like Aston Villa, who they managed to beat yesterday. Then when it comes to their away form, and that's Chelsea that we're talking about, their away form is only second to Arsenal. Chelsea have amassed more points away from home than they have done at home. As many as 25. Of course, Arsenal have amassed the most number of points away from home with 32. Away from home, Arsenal have played 16 games. They've won 9, they've drawn 5, and lost 2. Now, away from home, Arsenal do not score too many goals. They've scored 26, they've conceded 13. It's a bit of an issue. And out of their remaining 8 games, by the way, I think 5 are at home at the Emirates Stadium. Only 3 of those are away from home. I don't remember particularly which ones, but I think Everton is at home, Newcastle is at home, Man City is away from home. I think Fulham could be away from home. No, Fulham is at home. In fact, in Arsenal's next 5 fixtures, they have only 1 game away from home in the Premier League, and that's against Man City. That could be a huge advantage for them, not because it makes those games easy to win, but it makes your traveling less. Unfortunately for them, they are up against teams that are very, very stubborn. In Everton, in Aston Villa, in Bournemouth, in Newcastle, in Fulham, with Man City in the mix of that. Anyways, guys, that's the review of yesterday's results. Today, like I told you, there's a very, very significant game in the Premier League. And that game is between Crystal Palace away to Tottenham Hotspur. Remember when I said teams, when I was talking about teams that have a poor home record? Well, Tottenham Hotspur is one of those. I think they've only garnered 10 points at home. Now, Crystal Palace, being Crystal Palace, are not immune to beating up against the big boys. In the first leg, they lost this game by 1-0 at Selhurst Park. They'll be looking for the perfect revenge. And that perfect revenge is further to dent Tottenham's chances of staying in the top flight, because they could be relegated. Tottenham could be relegated. It's a sad reality, but it's possible. It's possible it can happen. Because that victory for West Ham against Fulham yesterday meant that Nottingham Forest and West Ham are just a point behind Tottenham Hotspur. Today is a must-win fixture for Tottenham Hotspur. Igor Tudor has lost his opening 2 games against Arsenal and against Fulham over the weekend by 2-1. Meanwhile, Crystal Palace will know that if they win their game against a poor Tottenham Hotspur, they'll go to 38 points, which puts them somewhere behind Newcastle. So that's the significance of that game. Of course, Crystal Palace will be without Maxence Lekwa following that red card against Man United. For Tottenham Hotspur, it's been the pool of injuries that they've had to suffer with, that they'll have to deal with. So looking at their probable lineups, you think Crystal Palace will have Dean Henderson, Jade Camvot, Chadi Reid, Chris Richards, Daniel Munoz, Tyreek Mitchell, Will Hughes, and Adam Wharton in that midfield. Yerby Pino, players like Ismail Sarr and Jürgen Strand-Larsen. On the other side, Guillermo Vicario, Pedro Porro, Radu Draxon, Mickey van de Ven, Achai Gray, Conor Gallagher, Joao Paulinho, and Pepe Matza, or Yuvis Bissouma, Rando Kolomwani, Dominic Calvert-Lewin, Xavi Simons, because Christian Romero is still out through suspension. I think that's going to be his 4th game for having accumulated so many red cards. Then injuries to Lucas Bagville, Wilson Odegaard, James Maddison, Dijat Kuzeski, Ben Davis, Rodrigo Bentancur, Muhammad Kudus, Dijat Spence, and Destin Udogie. For Crystal Palace, it's Edin Ketia, Chiaki Diakore, Jean-Philippe Mateta, and Caleb Cooper. Those are the ones out through injury for Oliver Glasner's men. Anyways, guys, it's been a pleasure doing this with you for the last 1 hour and almost 10 minutes. Thank you so much, Ponta, for having been part of this podcast, and every single one of you that managed to catch it, those that were in the comment section, those that liked, those that did not like but stayed on and watched. Thank you so much for having been part of this broadcast. Please continue liking what we do, continue supporting it. Keep following the conversation, keep sharing, keep commenting, share your thoughts. But in the other games, in the Coupe de France, Lens will be away to Lyon today, for those of you that are interested in catching that game. So, but also in the other results from yesterday, there was a game in Rayo Vallecano in La Liga, beat up against Rayo Oviedo by 3-0. Hamburg lost to Bayer Leverkusen in the German Bundesliga. Remember, these German teams, this Bundesliga game is designed to give, I think, Bayer Leverkusen more time ahead of their fixture with Arsenal in the UEFA Champions League. Then you had Real Sociedad beat up against Athletic Bilbao by 1-0 to advance to the finals of the Copa del Rey by 2-0 there. So that means Real Sociedad will play Atletico de Madrid in the finals of the Copa del Rey. Atletico de Madrid knocked out Barcelona 4-3 on aggregate. Then in the other semi-finals of the Copa Italia, Lazio and Atalanta shared the spoils in a 2-2 draw, just like Como and Inter Milan had played it out in a goalless draw for the first leg. So the reverse fixtures will come later on in April for the Copa Italia. So all that is on as well. In Coupe de France, Lorient got knocked out by Nice on post-match penalties, while Toulouse also knocked out Olympique Marseille on post-match penalties. So that's it for me. Guys, have a blessed rest of the day. We'll catch up later in our subsequent bullet broadcasts and videos. Thank you. Stay blessed, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye for now.